Suppose I just collected a few things that I thought you were maybe going a little bit off on. Yeah,
I don't think so.
Whoa.
Well, what's up? What do you want to talk about?
So I maybe misread this. It felt like PV maybe didn't want too much conversation to be devoted to Israel-Palestine because I guess that's maybe where Biden is getting a bit fucked in the progressive vote. But I just thought I'd defer it to do it today instead after the event. But I suppose I just collected a few things that I thought you were maybe going a little bit off on, or maybe just needed more elaborating on. So
sure, my brain is huge now. So yeah.
Yeah, so I've heard. Yeah. How are you? How's your book going?
I'm almost done. I've got like 2 short chapters left, like 40 pages.
Okay, I'll maybe get to that one in a minute. I've seen.
I think it's so far. I think it's a really well done, narratively done book to show the constant stream of failures from both sides. At least of anything I've read so far, I think it's a really interesting book talking about the political figures involved and then like why Israel couldn't accept peace here, why the Arabs couldn't accept peace here, what are the conditions that have to be met for peace to be possible, you know, what are the missed opportunities. I just think it's a really well done, like balance on both sides, at least from what I've seen of it. I don't know, I haven't seen any huge criticism of it, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'll probably ask a few things about that in a minute. I saw you've done like maybe 3 or 4 videos now or segments about human shields. So, specifically the human shields policy in 2002, 2005 that was kind of hit by the Israeli Supreme Court. Where are you on that now?
I'm guessing this is going to come up. I'm pretty sure this is part of Inquest into Martyrdom. I think it's going to come up in the Finkelstein book, so I'll probably do some deep dives on it. My understanding is that what would happen is when the IDF were performing military operations on the ground, according to them, what they found was that knocking on the door as the IDF increases the risk for some hostile firefight and people to end up getting killed, generally Palestinians. So what they started doing is they had a policy where when they were in the area, what they would do is they would try to grab a civilian and say like, hey, can you go and knock on this person's door and tell them that the IDF is here and can you come out, like, basically. And that was the policy. Now, on paper, that seems fine. Supposedly, I haven't dug into this, I'm regurgitating headlines right now. Supposedly there had been times though where Israel either commandeered people against their will or people felt like they didn't have a choice. And I read one story, one headline, I haven't done deep dives on any of this, where supposedly a person was sent into a building that they thought was booby trapped to make sure that it wasn't going to explode. In cases like that, I would say that it's obviously not okay. But I think that it's, even if that was the case, it's measurably different than like Israel had a policy to employ human shields until 2002 or 2004 or whatever, but yeah.
So I think 2002 was a temporary injunction. And so you're suggesting that it was like most like a voluntary thing.
That's how the IDF policy presented it, yeah. But then the question became
is that how they presented it before 2002 though? Because the impression I'm getting, and it's only from 1 or 2 articles, is that after the injunction, they said that they would no longer use human shields, but they would only limit it to volunteering, which suggests that it wasn't voluntary before 2002. Is that not?
I haven't heard that. You can link me that. We can read it right now though if you want. But I'm probably going to, this will be a deep dive thing later, so.
Yeah, it's a pretty short article, but what I've got here is basically them saying that after 2002, they're saying they're not going to use human shields, but we're going to just do volunteer stuff for wanted Palestinians. But then also you've got like, I think it's either the Supreme Court themselves. I mean, they called it human shields at the time, but it's either Supreme Court themselves or affidavits from soldiers saying that there is basically, it's Judge Barak, the guy who went to the ICJ, him saying that it's basically like, how can this ever be free will?
Sure, yeah.
And then there's like soldiers joking about the idea of like, well, who's going to refuse a request, quote, request, if you've got soldiers at 3 a.m. pointing guns in your face? So, yeah, and this is something maybe I'll look for at some point, but at the end of this article, which seems to be based on the Supreme Court case, is them saying that other methods they used included ordering civilians to pick up suspected bombs, another one being literally grabbing a civilian and firing over their shoulders, and another one being commandeering family homes and using them as military posts, but keeping the families in there to discourage any counterattacks.
So my understanding is all 3 of those would be explicitly not okay. Yeah, all three of those. Yeah, that's it. Those would be all explicitly not okay. The question is, were those a result of a practice of policy, or were those individual instances of soldiers acting improperly? I don't know what the answer is.
That's what I don't know, because it's just saying here that they've used them in this variety of situations. But
I thought that was
when the
my
IDF
understanding.
Actually said that they were going to stop it. They were going to limit it to volunteering. So that's where it suggests, that's why it suggests that before then their policy was very much involuntary, crazy shit like that. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to, when I dig into it, when I dig into it, I'll get more information about it. Somebody posted in chat yesterday. So I'm telling you where I'm getting this from, so it doesn't seem like I'm not like too married to this. Somebody posted in chat yesterday, in the history of them using this policy, literally only one Palestinian ever died doing it. Now, that doesn't exonerate it. That still makes it bad. If what you just said, if those 3 instances happened, and that was true, like even if they had 100 Palestinians check for bombs and none of those were bombs, that's still 100 different instances of using a human shield, of conscripting a civilian to work for you to prevent harm from your people. That's still bad, even if they weren't. But there are worlds. It's so annoying because nobody's good for talk about this. There's a world where I would technically think that not only would that be a good policy, even as a Palestinian, you might want that policy. I think I read a story or whatever, or I read an example of like, let's say for instance that your son or a family member, the IDF wanted to talk to them, right? And you were on your way home from a grocery store and you saw some soldiers that were kind of like outside your house, and I see that they're about to go and knock on my door. If a soldier came up to me and was like, hey, listen, we want to talk to your son. Do you want to go knock on the door and tell him to come out, or do you want us to do it? I would much rather do that. I would much rather do that than the IDF barge in or whatever fucking bullshit might happen there. But yeah, but I mean, again, it's the question is like, how did it play out circumstantially? If it was the case that only one Palestinian died, that seems to point in the direction that maybe it was a good policy. But if what you're saying is true, that because human shields, I don't think you can use human shields against like Hamas, but against like civilian populations, I think the IDF could absolutely use human shields. In the West Bank, you don't want to kill your fucking family members to kill IDF soldiers. Hamas might want to, but not civilian Palestinians. It could definitely be an effective deterrent. So yeah, but I'll dig into it more. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the same article I'm reading is saying that one was killed, some 19-year-old, after being forced to knock on a Hamas guy's door, and then the rest, some wounded. But yeah, do you know if I haven't been able to find this yet, but do you know if the actual Supreme Court case or any summary of this, what the Supreme Court said themselves is out there? Because I
think I read the dissenting opinion. Yeah. And I think the dissenting opinion, because there were 3, they were short. These were like paragraph or 2 long, I think. So maybe it wasn't even the full thing. Maybe they're just clips of it. But I think the dissenting opinion was the guy, I want to say he basically said like, yeah, I can understand we'd want to ban this because it looks bad. But like at the end of the day, all we've done is we've made Palestinians less safe because we're trying to give into some political thing to look better. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
I've heard, and I think it was the National Religious Party said that it was like making life harder for everyone. But yeah, it seems to be one of those things that very much like the left were in favor of the ban and the right wingers were like no. So yeah, but I think the way that you'd phrased it earlier was just like that the policy used to be, well, we'll just ask them to volunteer. It seems to be the case that soldiers and the Supreme Court themselves basically viewed it as coercive, at least until 2002.
But the possibility, but I think I even said that when I mentioned it, because I think that was one of the chief criticisms. It was like, well, how much consent does a Palestinian actually have if there's like 7 IDF soldiers standing there, with M4s? It's like, hey, do you want to go knock on that door? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see stats on like, I don't know if the IDF collected it, how many people agreed and what was the fail rate? Like what if only like 10% of people agreed? Well, it doesn't seem like there's that much coercion if there was, but if it was like 98% agreed, and it's like, okay, well, either it was a really good idea to cooperate or they really felt compelled to do it. Like, yeah, I don't know. But I don't have a lot of conviction around any of that, because that, like I said, that'll be something I dig into around the.
Yeah, because I can see the argument with the fact that it might be more violent if you just have them banging the door, being IDF, open up, like rather than just like using a decoy or something. Yeah, okay.
Like even if the police were to come to talk to my son, I mean, my kid's 12, but like if he was like 18 or something or unruly, like I would absolutely want a first pass at talking to my kid to tell him we need to go out and talk to the police rather than the police like barging in. Although we're all white, it's fine. But like I would definitely want the opportunity to do that. But yeah, I mean, I could see it going either way. Also, something that I'm really stressing when I'm fighting with people is there's a big difference between policy and bad behavior. So like, for instance, somebody tells me, has it ever been the policy of Israel to like intentionally target and kill civilians? My understanding is no. It's never been that policy, or at least in the past 30 years, it's never been that policy. But that's a way different question than, has an Israeli soldier ever committed the war crime of targeting and killing a civilian? If I had to guess, I would say almost for sure, yeah, I'm sure that's happened several times or dozens of times or maybe hundreds of times, hopefully not that, but most likely, yeah. But there's a big difference between like a soldier did a bad thing that they never should have done versus like the policy of the military was to engage in this behavior, right?
Well, it seems to be that since 48, the Israeli thing has been like, even if they want to do something, they won't make it policy, right? Even in 48, when they quite clearly wanted as many Arabs gone as they possibly could, but it never became policy, right? It was always just like, yeah.
I would disagree. I think it literally was policy, right? Because remember, during that civil war and the ensuing war, they were like, take as much territory as possible. Literally, that was the whole plan.
No, not taking territory. I mean, taking territory, that was definitely a goal. No one can test that. But expulsion, as far as we talk about policy, depending how you define policy, it was much more of a kind of like, we're going to communicate this understanding from the top down, right? So there'll be areas where like Ben-Gurion would be in a meeting of like, what do we do with the 50,000 people in Lydda and Ramla? And he's just not saying anything. But then they go outside for a cigarette break and they ask him and he just waves his hand as if to say, F them all off. And then they do it. That's what I mean by like, was it policy? So technically, no, it wasn't like the government from the top down, but there was very much understanding. There was very much like, no one's going to get reprimanded if you do it. You can be very loose with how you interpret hostility in Plan Dalit, and then just like different commanders from like sort of the middle down giving orders like that. Yeah, that's more how it works. That's what I mean by policy.
Interesting. I'd have to dig more there, but I think I disagree. I think it was explicitly the policy for expulsion, destroying villages. Like Deir Yassin wasn't like a one-off, like, oh my God, how did this happen? Like, I'm pretty sure they explicitly said, like, yeah, we're gonna fuck shit up, and our goal is to literally make these people never want to come back. These people, like after the 48 war, when there were Palestinians from Gaza that kept trying to sneak back into Israel, some were committing crimes and terrorism, but I think most of them literally just wanted to like go back to their homes or set up shop again, like near where their village was, if it hadn't been overtaken by a kibbutz or whatever. The policy at some point was like, kill all these people or like go back over the border and like destroy them so hard that they don't want to come. And this was like, I'm pretty sure the outspoken policy of the IDF. This wasn't a secret, and they did this over and over again.
The barring of them coming back was policy. Yeah, 100%. I guess, I think it's mostly just a semantic thing when it comes to the idea of whether the expulsions were, because for Plan Dalit, the argument against that not being a quote expulsion policy was that they would say that it was more to do with villages that presented hostility, for example, like on roads that they couldn't get their resources towards, and then trying to consolidate just like secure passage between cities, and then they would expel people on the basis of like hostility rather than just a blanket policy of expulsion. But that's kind of where the big dispute comes. So it's like whether or not this had been like a premeditated and planned ethnic cleansing, or whether it was actually just like an understanding that was communicated from the top down in a kind of like unofficial way. Because Ben-Gurion's whole thing was very much like he didn't want to be ever seen in history as the great expeller. So he can be like, look at everything we're saying and look at all these orders and all these documents. We're not saying kick out all the Arabs. Like it was never that simple. But obviously they were doing that, but just in a more unofficial way.
I think the frustrating thing is that like the Arabs in general, at least up to 73 and onwards, like they just managed to make exactly the worst decisions every single time, which gives Israel a pass on so much stuff. So like, or I wouldn't say a pass actually, but I would say like, so for instance, the Nakba, right? What would have happened if all of those Palestinians hadn't fled? Because my understanding is for the majority of the Nakba, the vast majority of them fled because they were worried about their villages getting fucking destroyed, right?
Yeah.
What would have happened if they would have stayed? I think it would have been really awkward for Israel to deal with. Like, do they keep them there and have like this demographic challenge inside the newly formed country, or do they actually expel them? Because for the Nakba, they didn't have to actually expel 700,000 people. It was a fraction. Was it like 10%? Do you know how many? I think it was less than that. Wasn't it like under 100?
10 to 15%.
Was it 10 to 15?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That they expelled, and then 600, 500,000 left on their own. What would have happened if they would have stayed? Well, we don't know, and we can't answer that question, unfortunately, now, right? So, yeah.
Well, I mean, some who stayed got massacred, right? So like 25 minimum massacres after people stayed and surrendered.
Sure, some might have, but then a lot of them were integrated in and worked, and also there was a lot of back and forth violence. Like, I don't know if they were all straight out just massacres, because even, well, I don't want to get too deep into it, but like even the Deir Yassin thing, I'm sure did that traveling Israeli guy or Israeli traveler or whatever, did he debate you on that at all?
He didn't debate me on it, but he made a response on it. I mean, he doesn't deny any of the facts of what happened. Like, people were killed after surrendering, and the people who died in the fighting were mostly civilians. He didn't deny either of those things, but he thinks it's not a massacre because the majority of the deaths happened in the context of a shootout. And then after the battle ended, 20 to 30, 40 people were killed but he doesn't call that a massacre. Is
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like it's just semantics. But as for Deir Yassin was also quite an exceptional one because the Haganah didn't actually want to do it. They didn't consider that village to be militarily significant. They considered that they had been making a good effort to keep the peace. Originally the plan there was to expel them. That was what the Irgun wanted to do, but obviously people they suffered too many. They suffered like a third of their forces having casualties. They got really fucking mad, and then they shot them. A bunch of people were shot after surrendering. But when you're talking about the people who would have stayed, that would have presented a massive problem. But that's what I mean by the expulsion policy without policy, is that like even in places like Haifa, where the official Jewish line from the leaders was stay after the battle, like we wanted the Arabs to stay, but on the ground you've got the Haganah who kind of don't want them to stay because they're kind of unruly. It's difficult for them to consolidate control, especially if you're preparing for a war. So they would be very they would arbitrarily search people. They would have very poor responses to looting from the worst excesses. They were just very, very rough with the population, so that basically just made them want to leave anyway, right? So you kind of have mixed messages even in situations where the official line is to stay. And also, that's not to mention the Irgun and Lehi, who were literally running around occupied towns trying to get people to leave by terrorizing them. So, where are you now with Arab war aims in the 48 war? I saw you were talking to one of my dudes about it yesterday.
I think it was 100% territorial conquest, and then kind of with the secondary goal of maybe trying to expel Israel. But I think it was mainly the states were all just looking to expand their territories.
So you're not really committed to the idea that it was that they were wanting to genocide them or anything like that anymore?
I mean, I think they would have if they had the opportunity to, but I don't know if they had the ability to. And I think the primary goal was acquisition of land. I think a secondary goal was expelling all the Israelis if they could, if the war was going really well. Maybe a tertiary goal maybe would have been genocide or establishing a Palestinian state. I don't know, but I think the first two were way more up there.
I think I'm just going to give you my take and then we'll see what you say.
Okay.
I think as far as trying to say that the genocide, I think you can, if anyone's going to make that argument, it's based on two things. One would be the fact that none of the documents are released, so we don't actually know what they were planning behind the scenes at all. We can only guess based on public statements that are very sparse. As far as genocide goes, I always get skeptical about people holding on to just one or two quotes. That's the same thing with, I guess, the ICJ case right now with South Africa.
Sure.
I think you mentioned it yesterday, this idea, the General Secretary of the Arab League saying that there's going to be a war of extermination and momentous massacre. It'll be like the Mongolian massacre or the Crusades, right? That one. But if you even look at the context of that quote, which is probably the worst one, is that the context of that is basically similar to a few quotes that he'd made a few years earlier, and him saying that there's the context of this time is Jews and Arabs both blaming each other for how a war is going to start. And him saying that is basically just hyperbole of him saying that, of him trying to blame any war that starts on the Jews and just saying he doesn't want it. But even if you have a quote like that, which is really, really extreme and seems very clear cut, it doesn't really match anything else this guy ever said. Before, he said that a year before the war started. A few days before the war started, he was actually much more frequently committing to an idea of saying things like, we want an Arab Palestine, but as for the Jews, the idea is that they just exist as an ethnic minority and, quote, they can have citizenship and be as Jewish as they like. And even for some Jewish majority areas, he was offering autonomy. So
I'd have to see what that quote is. My feeling for what you're referring to, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't think any of the early people cared about Jewish people that much. What they cared about were Europeans. I think that was the really scary thing, was the European settler project that was coming into Arab land, not necessarily about Jews. And the Jewish Europeans that were coming in here did not see themselves as Middle Easterners, and they wanted to set themselves. They viewed themselves as superior. They wanted to be democratic shepherds of Western democratic values and shit into their new secular area, and they saw themselves as better than the surrounding kind of religious dogs or whatever. I'm trying to act like a racist about it, but they very much saw themselves, I think, as Westerners versus Easterners. And the Near East people that were there definitely saw themselves as the native people, and these are European invaders, I think.
Yeah, but as far as with this guy in particular, it seems to be that he had pretty decent relations with the actual European Zionists. I mean, even Ben-Gurion described him, and this is after the quote's been published in that newspaper that it came from. You've got Ben-Gurion describing him as the most, or one of the most honest Arabs, like Arab leaders to deal with. Like he called him like the most honest, the most humane, like literally one of the good ones is how Ben-Gurion described him. So yeah, it's just that's the thing is I always get was when people, there's this tendency to like once people have kind of got like a preference with like Israel or Palestine, and then like the levels of charitability become very varied between the two groups, right? Because I feel like if you heard this from if people generally heard this from a Zionist leader, there would be very much people wanting to hunt for context and what exactly that quote means and where it came from.
A feeling that I had, so as I've done political research over the past year or two, one thing that I've been big on as I've been talking to people is I don't put much stock in quotes at all. Because like, show me a military action or show me an action of a country afterwards, because people say wild shit and a quote just doesn't mean anything to me. So I'm so sorry.
Excuse you.
My Red Bull, shut up. So what I would say is, so I'd say, okay, well, show me military actions or show me country actions afterwards. I don't care about the quotes. In Shlomo Ben Ami's book, he actually ups that a lot and has kind of changed my understanding even more, such that like public speeches by politicians are incredibly tactical things. However, like what happens is, so one thing I used to fight about relating to the 6-Day War, or we can even talk about like 48, is I would say something like, Israel wanted to preemptively strike because they felt like the Arab countries wanted to go to war. And they were ready and preparing for war. And the counter arguments I get all the time is, well, no, they actually didn't want to go to war. They didn't want to go to war. And what I never considered was that both of these statements could be true from both sides at the same time. So something that Ben Ami talks about a lot is a lot of times Arab leaders would substitute aggressive rhetoric or would substitute war for aggressive rhetoric. So if their populations were unruly or they were getting restless or they hated the Israelis, then they would say, like, yes, we will kill them everywhere we see them. And they would ratchet up like the mobilization of the armies. They would ratchet up these like dumb little cross-border things, whatever they could to satisfy their population, but they didn't actually want to go to war. So like my position right now for the 6-Day War, for instance, I don't think the Arab states at that particular point in time wanted to go to war. They just wanted their population to think that they would so that they looked big and tall and strong. But simultaneously, I think it's super fair that Israel looked at it and was like, these motherfuckers are going to annihilate us. So I think that like a lot of these things can be simultaneously true. When you talk about the General Settle stuff, I don't think I would ever lean on a particular quote. I think the figure that I would lean on and the actions that I would lean on would be, one would be the Al-Husseini guy, the Mufti, because holy fuck. And then two would be the assassination of Abdullah I in East Jerusalem, I think, when he traveled there after Jordan took over the West Bank. Because I think the Palestinians there considered him, was that because he was unloyal because he didn't push far enough into the Israelis, or didn't do a good enough job, or was making peace, or not making peace, but like, I don't know if Jordan ever actually even fought Israel in 48. I think they like took East Jerusalem.
They fought in Jerusalem.
Didn't they? Yeah, but they like stopped. Like, I think it was mainly, the majority was like Jordan took a ton of territory and then they just like kind of chilled. They might have fought a little bit in Jerusalem, but that was like it.
Yeah, because Jordan had the Arab Legion, and of all the Arab armies, the Arab Legion were the only ones who had any success fighting against Israelis, and they weren't even really that committed to the war. So as far, again, we're talking about Arab goals. The Jordanians wanted to take the West Bank and East Jerusalem. They didn't really want to do anything else. They didn't want to commit genocide. They didn't want to take any Jewish territory from their side of the partition plan. They hated al-Husseini. It was al-Husseini supporters who killed Abdullah.
Yes,
in 50,
one of his family members, I think, or from that group of people. Yeah.
And you're right about al-Husseini, but again, that also would go in the favor also against the genocide thing, because the other Arab leaders, when he turned up to Arab League and Arab Legion meetings, like he was barely ever invited. He would just turn up. They all didn't like him, even to the point that I don't even know. And this is something I get into arguments with people quite a lot. Is like, I don't even know how popular al-Husseini authentically was in Palestine either. Most of the population in Palestine was illiterate. It's like 50 to 70%. That whole like nationalism of al-Husseini in particular was very much an ideology of the upper classes. Most of them left before the war even started.
Sure.
And when it came to al-Husseini, Abdullah basically preferred living next to an Israeli state than next to an al-Husseini state. Like that was very
that continued into the 2000s, I think, where Jordan was more interested in forging ties because of all the stuff going on with the Palestinians historically and everything. Yeah,
and even local leaders, I didn't know this until quite recently, was that when the war was when the Arab militias were being kind of diverted towards urban warfare because they were failing at the rural level, Arab local leaders from Haifa, Jerusalem, and Jaffa actually went to Egypt begging al-Husseini to leave the cities alone. Because they didn't want the same kind of like war to the end that he did. They wanted, because these were multicultural cities, they wanted to stay that way. So it's like, I don't think people can ever like exaggerate just how much of a like renegade al-Husseini was, even just like in terms of because he was appointed, right? He was appointed by the British, even though he only came in fourth for the position of mufti as a political move. Even when he had power, he worked very, very hard and very aggressively to keep that power, often against his like opposition in a very repressive way. So in the Arab Revolt, people who opposed the Arab Revolt were literally like chased around and murdered. Like one of the ways that Husseini liked to kill his political opponents, like fellow Arabs, was to throw them into fucking pits with snakes and scorpions. So he ruled with a proper fucking iron fist. And that's the thing, is that like the one leader who I think did have genocidal intent in the 48 war from the Arabs was someone who all the other Arab leaders hated. That's why Lebanon barely got involved in the war. They only took like one village.
I think that something that was interesting to me, this is a question that I'd asked a lot before, is all my thoughts just went to Lebanon. I lost it. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I might have even asked you this question. Actually, I think I asked you this question over the PV weekend. Why were Jews so good at like diplomacy and politicking versus either all the Arabs or the Palestinians? Like, I don't understand how they outmaneuvered them so hard. And there's such an interesting passage. It's a couple paragraphs that because Ben-Ami reflects on this, and he's like, why was this the case? And a really interesting observation that he makes is that as Israel is maneuvering from 48 to the 90s, Israel's facing constantly the existential threat of elimination. That when things are getting really fucked, their back is against the wall and they're facing extinction. So it forced them, and many times, to be realistic about what they could achieve. That Israel couldn't afford to gamble on idealistic plans. There were plenty of times where they had to make concessions, where they had to beg for help, or to do whatever they could to remain okay in the eyes of the United States, but they do all these things because they were constantly worried about being eliminated. And none of the surrounding Arab states, or even the Palestinians, ever really have that fear. They can always afford to hold out for the next deal, or commit the next terror attack, or wait for the next war. They don't need support from the West. Even when they lost support from the Soviet Union, like, they've got all their surrounding states to help them. And that like pragmatic imposition on Israel from the realities, from the conditions that exist on the ground, might have been the thing that always pushed them towards considering more realistic options. And ironically enough, and then this feels good because it's funny, although I didn't realize it, but something I said before was more true than I even realized, that people hyping up Palestinians are actually hurting them. And then Shlomo expands on that by saying that, like, actually, yeah, people inflating Palestinian dreams to unrealistic heights, because Palestinians will never actually face extinction, will never actually face genocide, is always basically prompting them to fight for more and more and more and more. Because if they lose, well, they'll just wait till the next intifada, or they'll wait till the next UN mission, or they'll wait until the next whatever happens to give them another shot at it, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's mostly a good answer. You did ask me at the time, and I had a banging answer, even though it's only... I never heard it anywhere else, but I think it makes sense.
What was your banging answer?
It was that Zionism, even though it came from the 1870s, it was a modern movement.
Thanks for the 5 subs.
Like, it had already been through it. It witnessed like the Enlightenment and all that kind of shit. So they were very modern in the sense that they were very meritocratic. They were very based on talent. They were very willing to represent people who would otherwise not be represented, right? Like, women representation was a part of the Zionist movement before it was basically anywhere in Europe, before the UK at least. And obviously, because diversity is our strength, they were...
Unironically, like, imagine being woke, blah, 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 in fucking Israel in the fucking 70s. Has Golda Meir a fucking woman as the prime minister in an existential war? Yeah, and it's not even like a thought, you know? And
she, especially, like, she was one of the chief... She was like the spearhead of raising funds in America and the UK for the 48 war. She was expected to fundraise $25 million for arms from Czechoslovakia. She came back with 50 million and then did it again in the same year. So like that, but as unfortunately for the Arab leaders, their leadership was very much reminiscent of the Ottoman Empire, like a 500-plus-year-old feudal system that was all about families and who could take, who just happened to be in the right place at the right time. You know, people like Al Husseini, you know, just like total fucking shit for brains, like racist psychos who didn't really have anything that much to offer their own people and were just considered with keeping their own station. So I think that's a really big thing as well, is that the Arabs were kind of like unfortunately stuck with a lot of the remnants of the Ottomans, especially Palestine, because under the Ottoman Empire, the land of historic Palestine was actually kind of fucked even a bit harder than the rest of the Middle East. Like they were kind of abandoned. They didn't have like natural resources. That's why the illiteracy was so high. And the people who managed to take power out of that transfer from Ottomans to the UK, it was just families trying to improve their lot. And that's why you've also got like this phenomenon of nationalist leaders selling their lands to another nationalist movement that's planning to take it over, you know? And I think a really good example of that was Ibn Saud, the king of Saudi Arabia, and his contribution to building up to the partition plan. I think it was the Anglo-American Committee of Inquiry that was considering what to do with the Palestinian state and whether, like, the borders and everything. And his method of negotiating was taking these British and American politicians to where he was, to Saudi, and lecturing them about like how we have the power of the sword and we got rid of the Romans, so we'll get rid of the Zionists as well, that kind of shit. And basically just offering them like really ridiculous bribes. Like he offered them like a golden dagger and a robe to each politician and then took them for a tour around his harem. He offered one of the British politicians a wife, like the chairman of the committee. So I'm like, So that's what I mean by like feudal fucking representation. You know,
that's interesting too, because Israel always tried to be somewhat empathetic. No, that's not true. Never mind. I was going to say Israel tried to be somewhat empathetic and understand the desires and wills of other nations, but that's not actually true. The only ones they really understood were other Western nations, because Israel at multiple times did fuck shit with their Arab neighbors without realizing how stupid they were being. But yeah, the Arabs and like the old world, I don't know if you would say it, versus like the Israelis and the European New World were definitely at ends with each other, and you could see that in multiple points in the conflict. And
it's also like the even the partition plan negotiations. Partly, they also did just have a little bit more sympathy from Western leaders. So I didn't even know this, that that partition plan vote might not have even passed with the supermajority that it required had it not been for US and British pressure on smaller nations. I think it was Liberia and one other, Greece, was it? Yeah, there were two nations that were literally like basically threatened with economic sanctions to vote in favor of the partition plan. And I think that was the difference of whether or not it would have passed at all. But also like when the UN was drafting the partition plan, the Zionists went there and buttered everyone up and bugged all the meetings, so they knew what everyone was thinking, what everyone wanted. The Arab leaders went there and just lectured everyone and didn't budge on anything. So but that is the kind of phenomenon you get when you've got like autocrats versus people who are selected basically on a meritocratic basis.
Which is why one of the people, I don't know if I brought this up or not, if I ever do an autobiography or biographies looking at people, the Sadat guy in Egypt seems really cool. Of all the people I've learned about in the region, he seems like one of the bravest and coolest leaders to emerge, especially coming from an autocratic regime like that. But anything else? What else?
Where are you on Ben Ami's opinions on Camp David? Was it actually a great deal, or was it? It was an amazing.
All of these were good deals. The Palestinians are fucked themselves over and over and over and over again. No, not the Palestinians. Kind of the Palestinians. Arafat was a terrible human being. Arafat was a garbage fuck human being.
What does Ben Ami actually say about Camp David in the context of if I was Palestinian, I wouldn't have accepted that deal?
The problem, when he's saying that I might not have accepted that deal. So what Ben Ami does throughout the book is he tries to say, like, what are the possibilities that somebody could have pursued peace at this time? And then he tries to say, so like, for instance, one thing that Ben Ami says is oftentimes peace can only come after Assad has vindicated itself through military victory or whatever. That, like, for instance, peace with the Arab states in a conciliatory manner where you're taking territory from them after 67 probably wasn't possible. The conditions weren't right because Israelis were way too full of hubris and messianic hallucinations after winning wars, and it humiliated the Arabs, and that the conditions for peace probably weren't possible. But after 73, where the Arabs showed that they had some ability to stand up to Israel militarily, and when Israel was finding itself increasingly worried about doing things, the conditions at that point might have been more correct for peace. Israelis, even though they won in their blitzkrieg fights, they didn't like war of attritions, where over periods of time they were losing people, because Israel thrives on its military power, not on its population that it can throw continually into machine gun fire like the Arab states could. So he talks a lot of different points about like the conditions for peace were probably such that it could have happened here or it couldn't have happened here. With Camp David, on the Israeli side, the conditions for peace were there. They had the negotiators, they had the government, and the government had an unbelievable amount of courage. Even though they didn't have support of the population and they probably didn't have the political support of the home front, they were still willing to bank everything on getting that deal done. But Arafat was a man who always lived in paradox, or always lived in ambiguities, and he thrived in it because he was a celebrity, he was a diva, he made lots of money, he enjoyed to fight with terrorism, he always liked to employ all of these tools and never have a committed position at any point in time. And Camp David, it's possible that he never went to Camp David with even an end goal in mind. And he constantly fucked around with the whole process. Now, American negotiators, Clinton was weak and didn't understand the situation initially. He wasn't the bulldog that Carter was a counterexample given. And Ehud Barak and the Israelis might not have gone in with realistic assumptions about, say, like Israel, because initially when they went in, they were like, Israel's, or not, I'm sorry, not Israel, Jerusalem. That's not even on the table. That's not even a question about splitting even the old city. So they might have had bad things going in. But I think the Israelis really wanted. I think there was a chance that if it wasn't Arafat, if it was anybody else, the Israelis were willing to do something there. And by the time you get to Taba, the things that were on the table were unbelievable. Looking at those maps, the offers, the refugee fund, like, oh my God. And Arafat still said no. So, I mean, like, what are you going to do? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the impression I got from Ben-Ami was that I think he is blaming at least the American and partly the Israeli side for Camp David as well, because of just how scuffed a lot of the negotiation process was. The lack of understanding of what either side's red lines were, the fact that the Americans basically abandoned the talks for like a week at the beginning, and just kind of let them go between themselves. So I can get that, but yeah, when he talks about like Taba and Clinton Brown just being like the big missed opportunity, I think I agree with that. It does make a lot of sense. Sometimes I hesitate before saying like amazing deal rather than just like the least bad one for Palestinians, I guess, because the way that they're going to see it is that it's always going to be we're getting 22% of the land at the end of the day. But
yeah, I guess my understanding is that like Egyptian leaders and ambassadors, Saudi leaders and ambassadors, like the Arab world was like exasperated that Arafat was shooting these down and didn't want to negotiate and didn't want to actually make, I think
the last thing I wanted to bring up was settlement expansion in the 90s. And I think the way you describe it as only expanding within the settlements rather than making new ones.
No, I completely take all that back.
Oh, okay. Why?
I think Netanyahu is a subhuman piece of shit. And even under Rabin, the settlements continued to expand. They didn't make new settlements, but the way that they expanded settlements was a way more, insidious, was way more subversive than I originally realized. So for instance, they might not create a new settlement, but they'll say that, oh, well, this plot of land that's 4 kilometers away from the city is actually still part of this settlement, so we're going to build houses over there. And then there were a lot of like, there's that YWYE, there were a couple of deals that were cut, that were cut and uncut and shit, and I don't know. I'll dig into that more, but my macro level broad understanding is that through the 90s, on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side, both of them were pretty shitty partners for peace, mainly because I would blame Arafat for how the Oslo Accords were negotiated. The Oslo Accords, I hate to say this, I have a very negative opinion of the Oslo Accords now. I think they set the stage for everything to be really fucked, but...
the thing with the settlements is like, it's also actually a bit worse than that. They also, they would recognize some outposts, and they would actually they would naturalize outposts and then link them to an existing settlement, even though they were really far apart. I think also they, I've heard a few people mention this, when people compare the growth of settlements during the Oslo period, they always just compare it to like the 1 or 2 years prior to Oslo, which is really weird because that was the fall of the Soviet Union.
Repeat that last point.
Unprecedented. People will compare the expansion of settler populations in the Oslo period to just 1 or 2 years before.
Oh yeah, I already went over all that on stream. Somebody's made a huge email on that, and it's super disingenuous because, like you said,
the fall of the USSR.
So a ton of people were coming up with it.
Yeah. I think also Rabin did also expand settlements, but he, at the very least, made a conscious distinction between security settlements and political ones. He thought there were some settlements that actually had some security purpose, and the other ones were just like, it was just for expanding territory. And he explicitly only expanded security ones. He made that distinction himself. And Barak didn't do that.
Sure.
And Netanyahu definitely didn't do that. Netanyahu expanded the definition of security settlements in a very dishonest way. You know that clip of him bragging about fucking the Oslo Accords with Jordan Valley?
I haven't seen it, but it absolutely wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, Ben Ami talks about this as well. He talks about how the Israelis had a very exaggerated understanding of the security benefits of the Jordan Valley, like way in the east of the West Bank. And Netanyahu expanded it even further to basically give Israel this like 20-year lease on the Jordan Valley way in the east of the West Bank by defining it as a vital security interest, even though it wasn't at all. And one of the things Ben Ami mentions is when he gets to the Clinton parameters, he kind of rejoices in the fact that Clinton and most of the Israelis had finally acknowledged that this decades-long like mythology of the security benefits of the Jordan Valley had been realized, and then they were eventually going to get fucked off. And I think the time period in Camp David was something like 6 to 21 years of giving Israel a chance to move out of there. But then by the time they reached the Clinton parameters, it was just down to 6 because they realized that it just wasn't as important as Israel was making it out to be. And Netanyahu, I think, was a very big part of that, was just like defining the security interest very, very like much further than it should have been.
The Judea and Samaria circle jerk bullshit and all the more religious extremism that started to show up in Israel post 67 is pretty unfortunate. It kind of fucks a lot of shit up and is really gross. Never mind. Fuck. There's a difference between like what's right and just in the eyes of like morality and international law versus like what's possible. I don't think it's possible, but I do think it would be just that a dismantlement of almost all of the settlements, at least the ones that aren't close to that aren't like on the that aren't clustered together or whatever, should happen. The settlements are just so evil and bad and have fucked up so much for negotiating positions from the West Bank. And I don't like that. I don't think that Israel can have it both ways. Like, you can't have settlements in occupied territory and say you're doing this because it's your land, but then simultaneously say, well, Palestinians can't vote because it's occupied territory. That can't be both, because that is just apartheid, right? It can't be both of those things. So I don't know. I hate that settlement shit is so fucking annoying. I don't know what the final plan is there, but the continued attacks and the cycle of violence, like, it's going to take a really brave leader and a lot of political will and a lot of good international pressure on the Palestinians and on the Israelis, because it seems like there's never been good international pressure on the Palestinians, because the only ones that would pressure them are Arab leaders who secretly, don't like Palestinian leadership, but publicly would never say as much. It's a really frustrating, stupid fuck situation. Yeah. Unfortunately.
How do you feel about the prospect of like ANC style Palestinian militants encouraging settlements out of the West Bank?
Encouraging settlements? You mean encouraging to attack settlements?
I mean, when I say ANC style, I mean obviously don't target the people, but like if someone's going to set up a tent, like is it that bad if a fucking paraglider just comes and pulls it down?
Probably, because just the violent shit just fucks everything up. What the Palestinians need right now is they need somebody that you can negotiate with. It can't be a boss, and it can't be Hamas. Have we talked about that one leader? Barghouti. Yeah, maybe that guy.
Yeah.
He's got some historic authority, because I think he was a big militant in the Second Intifada. It seems like he's chilled the fuck out a bit, as I don't know if he's still in prison now, or at least I've heard that in his writings he's chilled out. It seems like he's like incredibly popular. Israel needs to actively work to empower the Palestinian people to have a representative. But the other thing is that, like, I don't even know what the fuck that means when I say that, because like, what can you force elections on them? Maybe that's just not their vibe. That's not their culture to have elections. But then their representatives in the past are who? Al-Husseini, Arafat, Abbas, like people that end up being corrupt, completely unpopular. Like even the PA under Arafat was incredibly unpopular. It was all fucking corrupt. None of the Palestinians liked it ever. So it's like, yeah.
Yeah, the thing with it's actually quite hard to find that much about what Barghouti believes throughout now, because I know there's this thing about people speaking in different ways to the Western media than how they speak to Arabs. So I don't know how much that's an issue. Like, a good example is Hamas, right? Hamas will actually, they don't say it's okay to target civilians. I don't know if you noticed that. Like in their 12-page report on October 7th, they literally say like it's an affront to Islam to target civilians, and they just blame it all on Israel.
Yeah,
right? Like, yeah,
I saw that report.
Stance. Yeah,
but then you also have to be very careful about what it means when we say target civilians. Just like whenever I hear a Palestinian or a Muslim or a defender or whatever, whenever I hear them say things like they want to fight against the occupation, you have to be very careful, because in our ears we hear, oh, that's kind of fair, West Bank and Gaza. No, for a lot of them, the occupation means the entire state of Israel. And for some,
that's true. Yeah. That's true. But I'm telling you that when Arab media, when they discuss civilians, they don't take the that tanky thing. No Israeli is a civilian because technically it's settler. They don't talk like that. Yeah, Arabs are actually more like Arab propagandists like fucking Hamas are actually a bit more competent than that on the world stage. They do acknowledge that there are Israeli civilians. They just blame it all on Hannibal doctrine and shit like that, right? Or and the helicopter fire. That's
but then I guess
their position. Yeah,
I guess, but I mean, like clearly they didn't feel that way on October 7th, unless you really.
Yeah, no, they didn't. I'm just saying what they say publicly.
The propaganda,
which is why, when I think about like someone like Barghouti, is he obviously was a big voice of the Second Intifada. He believed that there has to be confrontation alongside negotiation.
So did Arafat.
He said he opposed killing at least civilians within Israel proper. He said he has recently called for a third intifada, although his understanding of intifadas seems to be a bit different from people like Hamas. He's also endorsed the Geneva Accords, which is kind of like based on the Clinton parameters. So it would just be really interesting to see what he would have to say as a leader, because he is very popular. I don't think he could ever renounce violence completely, but to control it in a more meaningful way, maybe. But
sure. What do you want?
Bro, we had people an attack about mitzvah. Come on now.
We had what?
What?
The Barghouti, right before he was in prison, he ordered an attack on some girl's bat mitzvah.
So?
Some terror attack. This guy is.
I mean, hold on. Wasn't Mandela literally involved in an actual civilian death before he was imprisoned and before he was finally released from prison, so that he could be negotiated with and stuff? I think he was involved in some pretty radical shit too, even prior to.
There were also MK attacks on civilians that they took years to own up to, let alone condemn. Yeah.
I'm not saying he's a good guy. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, they need somebody to negotiate with, and if he's the guy, and if he can renounce violence, there has to be somebody, right?
I can see that, but the problem is I think, especially after Hamas, the idea of propping someone up and then being responsible for propping up the next person that becomes the new Hamas or the new Yassin, the guy who's started Hamas essentially and started off he's an okay guy, and then it just became Hamas.
Sure. This is what I would wait before we move on to that. Okay. Here's what I think. I think right now, Israel making a bad decision would be better than them making no decision, because the status quo right now is unacceptable and is on a crash course for destiny. Something is going to explode at some point when these annexations start. That we already delayed with the Abraham Accords, but at some point, Netanyahu is going to want to start annexing the West Bank, right, proper into Israel.
It's not going to happen. That's my thing.
Why would you say it's not going to happen?
A better pathway, because Netanyahu has almost no mandate from the Israeli people to do anything right now.
That was literally the impetus for the Abraham Accords. He was about to start annexing the West Bank, and I think it was Bahrain that reached out and was like, hold on, let's chill, let's not do that, and we can do peace instead.
No, I'm not saying he didn't want it. I'm saying that it's not going to happen. That's all I'm saying. But also, what I'd say is, rather than prop up someone we know has been a terrorist already and has called for the third intifada, but we don't really know what that means yet. Maybe he means only killing some civilians. Maybe he means 30% civilians. But we have an alternative pathway, I hope, in having an Arabic coalition take over control and make their presence more seen, which they seem to have said make some sort of promises in the rebuilding of Gaza. I don't know how deep that's going to go, but I think going through a pathway of like having an Arabic coalition take control and like be a benevolent,
how does that work now, though?
regime.
Not to, unfortunately, at 2000 plus, now we have to start factoring in religion. When you say Arab coalition, you mean a Sunni coalition.
Yeah.
How is that going to take control of an extremist Islamist Shia-backed government in Gaza?
Gaza is Sunni. And Hamas is Sunni as well.
Oh. Wait,
Yeah,
why the fuck do they get
the-
support? How do they rationalize it to get support from fucking Iran and Hezbollah and the Houthis are both? The Saudi Yemen people are...
Killing the Jews is a very good unifying
okay,
factor
never mind. Fuck it
between
then. That would be a
both
thing then, I guess. Okay.
Yeah. But another thing is that he brought up is, I don't know why this keeps getting brought up, the what is it called? The Jordan Valley is like this. I heard the claim that it's like mythological. The idea of how important, how like it's unshakable was, I feel like, is what I was reading from Ben Ami when he said that the mythological Jordan Valley, but it's made as like this insane idea that the Israelis wanted to maintain some sort of control over the Jordan Valley, which is like the border between Jordan and like having some sort of control there. And then they eventually settled for some sort of installations of warning systems. It's not like this was like this insane, unshakable resolve that Israel would never give up. It's seen as like this thing is like, oh, this is the proof that the Israeli side was actually like unhinged as well in Camp David.
Wait, what is the point?
I don't know why you're bringing it up,
thing.
and I feel like you just heard the word fucking mythological and then just ignored everything else I said. I literally said that it was exaggerated.
You made it sound like it was a complete.
No, I didn't make it sound like I said
made up.
exaggerated like 3 or 4 times. I don't know why you're just. It's because I said mythological the first time and I read it in the book. You've just decided to stick on that for the rest of fucking
And you
eternity.
repeated it
You know
today.
this like 3 times.
And you repeat.
Yeah, because I'm quoting the book.
Okay.
As in the value of it, like, as in the exaggerated value of it was mythological. Also,
which
of these? Wait. I could be wrong. Okay. Barghouti was charged with 37 something crimes. He wasn't convicted of all of them. Was the bar mitzvah one that he was convicted of?
No, this was like after he was already sentenced. He already had like, but it was said that it was his attack that was orchestrated on that bat mitzvah. Allegedly, it was before he was captured and it was already set in stone or something. I saw, but yeah. What about that? I mean, he still did shit in a terror.
Yeah, he probably did. But bro, I mean, hold on. The Israelis were
back to the peaceful kind.
Wait, hold on. Israel negotiated. Israel negotiated with Arafat for how long, bro? And like this guy was like the king fucking terrorist. If they can negotiate with Arafat over and over and over and over and over again, they can negotiate with the other dude.
It's different to like install. Hold on. It's different to install a terrorist.
No. Hold on. Wait. Hold on. No, stop. Install implies doesn't have popular support, and you would make him the leader. We're not talking about installing anybody. It'd be releasing a guy who already enjoys pretty wide.
Him to become one.
Yeah, that's not installing. He's already enjoys.
He's
like
more popular than Hamas, bro.
He's more popular. He's like the most popular politician among the Palestinian people. That's not installing.
Well, right now he's installed in a prison cell.
Okay, let's say you don't release him. What do we do? Wait, hold on. Who does Israel negotiate with right now to make peace with the Palestinians?
I think there has to be an emerging leader from after the Arabic coalition. Once that comes into power, and then you could start seeing actual like good things happen, like some sort of calming of the situation and some sort of economic stability, and a chilling of some of the restrictions on the Gaza Strip once the Arabic coalition comes in. Some sort of movement between.
Is there any talk about this? Is there any talk about this right now whatsoever? Like, are there any Arab states that even want to fucking get involved in this shit show of a project?
From Biden said that they do want to. That the Saudis and UAE have put up that they will be a major player in the rebuilding of Gaza. That's what Biden has claimed has been
major player in the rebuilding might just mean sends money. That doesn't mean anything. You need like political commitments.
That's what I'm not 100% sure about yet. But I think that I pray because like I feel like that's the only fucking way anything gets solved. I don't think the Barghouti method is going to go very well. Maybe it could. Let's say that the Barghouti method has like a 20% chance of leading to some sort of like peace. I think, and like 50% chance of like being way worse than our current situation, and like a 30% chance that everything stays the same. And then I think the Arab coalition has like a 50% chance of moving towards peace. Actually, even higher.
Wait. But what's the percent chance peace that an Arab coalition even forms? Again, is there anybody that actually wants to step up and do this? Like, take political responsibility, not just send some fucking money.
I feel like if the Arabs had
through the pressure of the U.S.
I feel like if the Arab leaders I feel like if the Arab leaders had your brain, why would they have ever negotiated with Begin?
My brain or his brain?
What do you mean?
David's.
Oh. What do you mean by that? My brain.
Because Begin was a fucking terrorist.
Literally.
And the Arabs negotiated peace with him over the Sinai.
Although, to be fair, that was with heavy. Was that Carter at the time? That was with heavy U.S. pressure as well, though. And that track started secretly too. But
yeah. Again, the point is that we don't know what Barghouti believes, nor do we really know what he would be like as a leader. It's just like, compared to Hamas, it can't get much worse, right?
Well, you can not have Hamas there, and I don't even know. I really don't even know if he would be better than an Israeli occupation. That is saying something. When an Israeli occupation, like West Bank style, would be a nightmare. Did I say Israeli or did I say Gaza? I don't know. I meant Israeli occupation over Gaza. But I understand the point of Barghouti. But do you want to move on to the 48 war? Some of the contentions you had.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
wait. Hold on. I want to force an answer real quick. Hold on. Wait.
Fine. Go.
If the Arab coalition doesn't form, what is Israel's responsibility going forward for making peace with Palestine? What should they do?
Everything's fucked. They should both get nuked, and they should all
move.
Good one.
So meme answers. Okay, you can't contest any of our answers then if you're going to only give meme answers. If you don't have any other alternatives.
I'm not doing I'm not doing. No, I'm saying that the Arabic coalition should be forced, and maybe I'm not saying it's an impossible idea. I'm not saying that it's like this is the worst idea of all time. I'm saying that should be like the absolute last resort. I agree that it is a possible solution, and I don't think it's a good one, and I don't think it's any better than the Arabic coalition. That's all I'm saying.
Oh,
it's definitely way worse than that.
Okay, I don't understand. I don't know if that answered anything I just asked, but okay. All right. What was
what did you ask that I didn't answer?
If the Arab coalition doesn't form, because it doesn't look like it's going to, I don't know if we have any indication it will, then what should Israel do to push for peace? How should Israel try to make peace? There is no Arab coalition, and if the Arab coalition doesn't form.
I truly don't know. I think that the situation will be fucked, because there is no way that Israel... Oh, if you can't form an Arab coalition, maybe I would say, fuck it, do Barghouti. It's probably better than an Israeli occupation, just barely.
Okay, fuck it, yeah.
I would eventually say that.
Do you drive a Tesla?
Okay. No.
Oh, okay. Kia. I do agree with you. I think an Arab coalition or some other Arab states being involved, I think would be really good, but okay.
Yeah. To the 48 war, I was digging a little bit more, and I was right. There was a shit ton of problems in the beginning of the 48 war. Israel was deeply on the defensive and losing territory and regaining territory, but losing again, and then like just barely holding on to what they have and losing a couple of villages. And they only started to turn around after the first ceasefire. They shipped in 50 million rounds of ammunition, like thousands and thousands of guns and other artillery and things from Czechoslovakia. So there was a point at the beginning of the war for a while in which Israel was on the defensive and was not doing well. So I didn't just make that shit up.
Being on the defensive doesn't mean the same as losing, though, right? They were on mostly the problem with the beginning of the 48 war until April was that they were struggling to move their equipment and supplies between areas because of the attacks on the convoys, right? As far as losing goes, they were struggling to hold on to places like that.
Yeah, they didn't even have all of the 47 and partition land. They didn't even have the majority of that secured at all. They had maybe 60% of the partitioned land, which was much smaller than even the after the 48 war land. like that's all they had there, and they were struggling to keep that. So no, I don't think that Israel was this mighty warriors that were all organized that were ready to defeat all 7 armies from the beginning. I think there was a serious struggle at the beginning of the war.
No, they weren't. Yeah, they were outgunned. Definitely, they were struggling to move supplies around their area. They were also mostly struggling to hold on to places that were kind of isolated, like the Etzion block, which is very isolated. But as far as them like losing significant territory, I thought my understanding even before the reason they decided to go more offensive was because they were kind of surprised at the Arab failures to consolidate control around the rural parts. They literally changed their strategy quite early on to go from rural to raising antagonism in cities because they were failing, and that was actually one of the factors in deciding to go offensive in April, was Czech arms, but also the fact that Arabs were just like not as impressive as they'd expect them to be, because Arabs had a lot of equipment and a lot of shit, but they had a lot of planes but no pilots, right? So even with more planes, they were able to carry out like less than a quarter of the attacks that Israel did. Same with, they had a lot of guns but very little ammo. They had
I would say that they were outgunned. I think it's disputable if they were outnumbered from the beginning of the war or if they were already an advantage by that. But I think it majorly came down to just being a skill issue of just not having as well of a organized army and communication between the attacking armies, or even the communication between the same army attacking.
Yeah,
but
I don't think I've ever heard that described as losing, but yeah, difficulties for sure. Yeah.
I mean, they were losing territory, like. Not a lot, but they were losing, and they barely were holding on to much to begin with.
I would have to watch like a documentary, look at a step by step of the early days. But my understanding is that like it was a little bit even. I think I would even take LonerBox issue with what LonerBox said, struggling to move supplies. I think there were times where was it Jerusalem or Tel Aviv that was like no, it must have been Jerusalem or another city that was like more inland that was like under siege, and for a while it was scary. I remember reading over and over again they tried to send like 100 resupply trucks, like 97 of them were destroyed. But as soon as like the Haganah and everybody mobilized and started their shit, it was over. That
was months into the war already, though.
It might have been months in, but I don't. But it was just.
Hold on, wait. Before that, they didn't. That Haganah thing. That was after they had a massive increase in the number of Haganah. I think it was like the army basically had a completely restructuring and turned into an actual army. And then their numbers doubled. I think it went from like
an actual army. Hold on, what do you mean? Didn't they have fighting practice for 20 years leading up to this under the Yishuv? Hadn't they been fighting for decades?
Yeah,
How would you mean they just organized? Like,
because they actually did not. They were just like a shit ton of like militias and shit at the beginning of the war, at least. And there was a massive restructuring of the Haganah between the first ceasefire and after that, and all the arms. But I think you should watch like some sort of video of just like captures and like the war, just to like grab it in your mind. But what I would say is
that is true. They were in the middle because they didn't want to become an official army under the British because it was illegal. So part of their defensive posture at the beginning was them like in the middle of organizing their forces. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, but when we say organized, yeah, they might have merged into the IDF and everything, but like it wasn't like a ragtag group of people. Like they were very combat capable.
That didn't even happen, but that was completely after the war. But what I would say is that that's true. They had some training, but so did the Jordanian army. The Jordanian army had thousands and thousands of British trained troops, and they were fucking up Israel for a while.
I don't.
Whoa! What's your timeline? I thought the Jordanian army didn't get involved until May. The Haganah offensive was already beginning in April.
I might be mixing it up between the Jerusalem being cut off. I'm not even talking about Jerusalem being cut off. I'm talking about mostly the what I was talking about with the Jordanian stuff was like the Jerusalem being cut off, and that also might have to do with the Iraqi irregulars. But
Jerusalem being cut off was like the big problem at the beginning. Yeah, until they eventually got Castle in April, and then I think from then on it was pretty fucking.
Yeah, once they broke through that, I think everything was easy sailing from there.
But that was literally a couple months into the war, and that was after the first ceasefire. Is what I was talking about. The beginning of the war. Wasn't it like the USA? Didn't the USA say that Israel will not last more than 2 years, and that they were already starting to like figure out draft plans on supporting the Arab states so they could have influence?
I don't think anybody even cared about that much influence in that region yet. No?
Yeah, but I think I'll send you this later once I'm home. But there was like a CIA document that was released that talked about the United States position on Israel and how they thought they were going to lose. Like I'm not exaggerating when I said that the Israeli defensive looked very grim at the beginning of the war, and only through their like basically the desire not to fucking die and completely restructuring their army and coming up with a new strategy. I think their airports were completely bombed by Egypt. Like there was all sorts of trouble at the beginning of the war.
I don't know what's happening with your timelines here. You're saying they didn't get into the offensive until after the first truce, but the first truce was May, and again, like the big offensive with was it Operation?
I'm mostly talking about
whatever
the
fuck it's called was April.
Or Egypt. Yeah, I'm mostly focusing on like the offensive against Egypt, not even the Jordanian one. But that was. I gotta also digest more about the exact timeline on the Jordanian stuff, but I was mostly focusing on like the Egyptian front and like the Sinai and the capturing, the pushing towards Tel Aviv by the Egyptian forces, which was before the first ceasefire.
Okay.
What else is there? You said something else. What was it? Or strong, because you called me out, LonerBox, said I was making some shit up or something, or you completely disagreed. What else did you disagree with me about 48?
It was mostly about you talking about the intentions of the Arab leaders and the Arab armies, and saying that it was at least ethnic cleansing. When you say at least ethnic cleansing, it sounds like you're saying more likely genocide, and you invoked that quote as well from General Secretary about the massacres thing, even though that quote doesn't really tell you anything about what that guy generally believed, and how he was perceived, even how he was received by Ben Gurion himself. Like,
yeah, but I mean, he clearly was not for any Israeli state whatsoever, and he clearly was talking about if there was a war, there would be momentous massacres and like the Mongolians and shit. Like, I don't think that I was trying to. Someone else tried to tell me after that I was talking shit, and then showing me that like there was more context, but the context didn't really change anything. It was clear that that's what he meant. That like
the context is him hyperbolizing to try and avoid a war, because what he wanted was an Arab state with Jews as living as an ethnic minority. That's what he wanted. As far as wanting to even to remove them, not even dhimmi, no, equal citizens. He didn't say dhimmi. I don't know why you added that in. Like, it's so obvious that your bias is just like inserting things that aren't there.
I want to be clear about that. But I'm not trying to lie about anything.
The fact is that throughout, again, a year into him giving that quote in that newspaper, Ben Gurion described him as one of the most compassionate and reasonable Arab leaders, or maybe even the most. So yeah, it just seems to be that he was taking a very anti-war stance and hyperbolizing to avoid it. But as far as going from that one quote to actual intention to a military, to an actual policy or plan, it's just you've got fucking worlds between each of these stages. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll look for more. Quotes from the other Arabic leaders.
There are a couple more quotes that you can probably find, but the fact is that by the time the war starts, you've got the Jordanians don't really want to fight at all unless it's over Jerusalem. The Egyptians.
Wait, I have a question. Do you think that if they captured all of the Israel, they would give them equal status citizenship? Is that what your claim is?
Well, the fact is we don't know. Maybe not. There's good reasons to think they would. There's good reasons to. No, but what do you mean be realistic? We don't know. This is why people have that same skepticism when it comes to what were the Israeli plans for the removal of Arabs, right? It's I think you can say they said a lot of shit, but again, we don't. Yeah.
The problem with doing historical counterfactuals is we tend to superimpose onto the past attitudes in the future. The Arabs would have absolutely genocided every single Palestinian if the Arabs had the mindset from 67 in 48 after losing that much. But if they would have managed to win that very first war, well, the entire international landscape changes. It might be that maybe they want to genocide the Jews, but maybe with pressure from the Soviet Union, somebody like, hey, listen, you guys are about to get invaded. All your shit is going to get fucked. If you don't stop, you just destroyed a country. And the Arabs at that point might say okay, well, chill. We'll just divide this all and be chill and not genocide. That could be the case because of the international pressure, right?
Maybe we should look at the areas that had Jewish people and the armies passed through. how many Jews were left over in?
Well, yeah, but this was as part of the war.
Zion, is that the one you're going to use? Like some of them, sometimes like a few hundred were kept as POWs. Like,
yeah, but how many were left
there were massacres?
How many were left to stay in Jordanian occupied territories taken from Israel? How many were left to stay in?
Yeah, but hold on. But wait. You can't use this as evidence of genocidal intent when this could be evidence of retribution for the outcome of the 48 war. What? Right? There weren't 700,000 Israelis expelled from other.
Wait, hold on. I'm not talking about like. Okay, so let's say they didn't want to, but they wanted to get revenge by doing genocide.
But if they won in 48, if they won in 48, they wouldn't need to get revenge. They would have won, right? In victory, they might have acted.
What if they want to get revenge for all the attacks that Israel did, for them wanting to even have the audacity to create a state?
I don't think the drive there is going to be the same as the humiliation they felt by losing to fucking Jews in 48 in a war when they're Arabs. It's unbelievable.
The thing is that we know how Arab leaders treated Jews who they had control over it, because after the war, there were like about 1 million Jews living in different Arab countries. There was no policy of genocide against them. They were treated very badly. They were treated as second-class citizens. Sometimes there were pogroms. Sometimes those pogroms were actually condemned by the local leaders. Even Azam Pasha, the guy who said there will be massacres and all that, condemned a pogrom like 2 years earlier before the war. There was not even a policy of ethnic cleansing, apart from Egypt was the only place where they had an actual policy of removing local Jews. So they applied to like maybe 500 or 1,000 people. So yeah, I think we have a rough indication.
Just because there's no to go back and forth on this. And LonerBox, I'm going to speak for both of us, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that me and LonerBox will both say, is it possible they would have genocided them? Absolutely, it's possible. But can we say that with 100% certainty? It's so hard to develop that counterfactual. Okay, well then we all probably roughly agree it's possible they could have, and they definitely expressed some genocidal intent, sure. But it's also possible that if Israel would have made way more progress on the Egyptian front or on the Syrian front, maybe they would have pushed all the way to Damascus. Maybe they would have pushed all the way to Cairo. Maybe all the Arabs in these cities would have been expelled. Who knows, right? But like that counterfactual is such a macro, and there's so much stuff that's going to change internationally and on the ground that it's hard to say with certainty what would have happened past that point, I think.
Maybe with a slightly shifted cabinet.
Without records, it's really hard to do any counterfactual or see what the actual true intent was. I can't really make a convincing argument like that much without even statements that are like genocidal. There's a lot of like overhyping of wars, and I agree that can happen. So it's really hard to say what the true intent of the Arabic side will be without seeing like records of what they were trying to do, etc.
Based on what we have with actual records, like a slightly different cabinet in 1967 would have ethnically cleansed Gaza and the West Bank. There were some people who wanted to do it. So.
Okay. Any other contentions, my fellow orbiter, Mr. LonerBox?
Bro, you're like a meteor, right? No, okay.
No, he is my orbiter. I'm not even talking about you, Mr. Destiny. I let him come talk to me sometimes, you know. Wow.
I think I'm satisfied.
Are you sure?
Do you have anything for us, Dustin? Did you enjoy PV? How did it go compared to other events that you've been to?
I don't think I talked to you much about a lot of the drama stuff going on. The reason why I was a little bit hesitant to promote it on stream is I thought that event was going to self-destruct. I thought that it was going to be the culmination of like 3 or 4 different dramatic things that were going on behind the scenes. So that was my expectation the whole time. I thought it went incredibly well. I thought it was like an amazingly managed event. Kyle did an amazing job at managing talent, moving people around, scheduling people. Every part of that moved way smoother than I thought. I think it was easily the smoothest event that we've done. So yeah, I was really happy.
Felt pretty smooth. Oh fuck! What was I gonna? Yeah, as far as drama, all I heard was I saw a video from President Sunday called "The Downfall of Progressive Victory" or some shit, and I just thought, well, it's President Sunday. It's probably nothing at all, like some autistic bullshit. So I guess I was right. I don't know. I don't know why there was a downfall before we went in, but yeah.
Steven, you owe me $200.
Why?
I won because we made a bet.
What do we bet on?
We bet about the canvassing event.
Oh yeah, I did bet you that it was going to be fucking horrible.
Did you bet it was going to be
He said he bet that it was going to be a failure.
Yep, I did.
Jesus,
I
what
did.
a pest.
I thought it was completely.
You owe me $200.
All right, I'll add it to your first paycheck compensation for our first episode of Bridges. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds good.
I thought you were betting that I'd be shorter.
Shut up.
I was betting that you'd be bigger, actually.
Ooh.
Whoa. What were you expecting? Like a 7-foot fucking...
Look, I heard things
those
about
blow-up
stone
guys that
hill
you see in front of
giants.
car dealerships. What?
Yeah, I was. I've heard things about stone giants and Scottish people and something about those two things, probably.
I am probably the shortest man in Scotland.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was alluding towards. Thank you.
Is what it is. I want to... Fuck, wait. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this, so I'm going to type it to one of you. Just... Okay. Right.
Wait, what?
Hang on.
What?
Don't type it to me because I'm not at my computer right now.
What are you,
I'll type
near
it
the
to
horses?
Dustin. Are people speaking about that, Dustin?
Hold on. What? No, I don't know about that. Wait, type me more about that.
Okay, I'm back at my computer. Type it to me about it.
No, fuck you. Too late. You said you didn't want it. Now I want to know more.
No, I'm back. I want to know.
Wait. Don't tell. Hold on. Wait. Don't tell. Hold on. I'm trading. 1 second.
No,
wait.
fuck you. He's gonna troll me. You
No,
have
I'm
to
not.
tell me.
Hold on.
Wait. Oh, this is so juicy.
Yeah, I need to know that. Tell me that, and then I'll trade you. Don't tell.
I can't.
LonerBox.
Not right now, though. Obviously.
Okay, well, we'll
I'll
tell you this
later.
thing in the future. I'll tell you this later. Okay?
No shot. LonerBox
Yes!
message me.
No!
No.
Loner.
Fuck you.
You're gonna
Loner.
be decommissioned from orbit.
Yes.
I'm not saying anything.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Fuck you. That's way less juicy.
Oh my god.
Probably not yet. I don't know.
My god, why are you so loud? Okay. All right. Anything else? I need to do my shit.
I do have
Okay.
something else. I wanted.
Oh, shit.
What?
I wanted to try to give my grand narrative on the settlements and the reasoning for them and the why they happen and like.
Okay, go. If you
I
can do it
feel
fast
like-
without, yeah, go. Grand narrative.
Okay. Fair. So I feel like with the things like Jerusalem, I don't think that they started at all because of the Great War of '67. I think for a long time they did want to have East Jerusalem. It was extremely important, like the Western Wall and whatnot. I think annexing that was always the plan. I think at the same time there's this problem with a bunch of people that want to move into settlements, and then the Israeli government just fuck it.
You think that's probably going to be a fear in Gaza? Is that regardless of how it doesn't have majority support, but it doesn't need it, right? It doesn't need majority support for a bunch of crazy settlers to go into Israeli-occupied Gaza, so long as the government just doesn't want to use force to remove them.
So that could be a problem, but I think that the international pressure from the entire world is so focused right now that even if in Netanyahu's best world he's going to end up doing that, that's not going to end up actually happening.
So you agree that we might need some international pressure to fucking nudge them out if they decide to try it? Because they will try it. I think that's 100% true. That
They will
some
try
people
what?
will try. Some right-wing Israelis will try to settle in Gaza.
I feel like it's just so stupid. And Gaza, no offense, Gaza sucks. There's not holy shit there. It's not Judea and Samaria. It's not the cringe biblical shit that all these fucking cringe loser Zionists are super obsessed with. I don't think anybody gives a fuck about
Yeah,
Gaza.
it does suck, but there's the right-wingers have a big fucking national trauma about Gush Katif, and there are people literally fucking camping outside the wall being like, we're ready to go back in.
Gush Katif, is that one of those settlements that was taken down in 2005 or 4, the disengagement?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, but who cares? I think they'd rather just continue to settle more and more of the West Bank.
Yeah, so that wasn't even part of the original Jewish kingdom or blah 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 whatnot, but that was somewhere that they did live for hundreds of years in modern times, the before the Aliyah and stuff.
Yeah, but
so
they've got Tel Aviv. Who the fuck cares?
They got another place. Yeah, I agree. And it's not
There
even
are
that
some people
wholly
who hold on to the fact that there are some people who hold on to the fact that there were Jews in Gaza up until 1929 when a bunch of them had to get fucked off because of the violence. Okay, like some people. Yeah, again, I'm just saying there are people who are clearly talking about it and who have are protesting quite physically outside the border because they want to go and do it. Like I'm just saying, they'll probably get removed because Netanyahu doesn't want to deal with that. But fuck, it's not like a non-thing. I don't know.
It's not going to happen.
Palestinians have security concerns as well, you know. Do you think no one's going to try, or do you think like they will try and they'll get fucked out?
Oh, I think some people will try to cross the border and they'll get fucked out from the beginning. Okay. I don't even think it'll get to the stage of international pressure. Okay. That's all. Yeah. All right. Bye. Enjoy your stream.
What?
What do you think is like? So the war after the war ends. So it looks like Israel is gearing up to head south. Let's say they do their southern sweep. Once they finish the operation, they have to leave, or the major military operations have to end. Like, where does Israel go from here?
Don't know. I know they want other Arab countries to get involved and to take some of that burden, but I don't think they're actually going to do it. Why the fuck would Egypt or Qatar or any of these people like go into Gaza? I don't know. I think I don't know. I feel like if I could be a fly on the wall in the Israeli cabinet, I'd probably see them just being like, you know, maybe they'll leave.
I feel like October 7th helps them extend the status quo so much. Like they get so much international authority. Maybe not with like young kids or whatever, but it's just such an easy. It's like their new Holocaust, basically. Like for them to portray themselves as victims and just capitalize on that and continue to expand.
Yeah, I have no idea. I think it's gonna require like the only good outcome comes from a lot of international involvement, whether it's from the United States or the UN or from Saudi or Qatar, but like none of these countries are going to have any interest in doing that. So
the Palestinians like really need a cohesive leader representative. I think that's what the hardest thing right now. I think that's the hardest thing right now. Yeah. Do you think, here's an idea, because the more that I like looked at the maps, the more that I thought about the situation, the one-state solution would just be so good if it would work. It eliminates every weird, cuck, stupid fucking problem. Do you think there's any chance that like the Knesset can, oh fuck, does Israel even have a fucking constitution? Isn't the way their founding document works?
Yeah, they do, yeah.
Do they? Okay, because I thought they had a weird way of adding rules to where they don't technically just have like their founding document or there's some weird cuck shit. I'm sure they must have some kind of way to like.
Well, they have like their Declaration of Independence. I don't think it's like it's not a constitution. It's like
yeah, but I mean, I think they have like initial laws or something, but I don't think they have like a formal constitution. But I'm sure they've got some kind of ultimate authority document. I wonder if there is some way that they can enshrine like certain rules into the Israeli like legal system that need like an 85% vote to overturn, and then just start annexing or creating basically a unified state. So even if they were like a 50-50 demographics, they're not gonna get voted into non-existence or some crazy shit. Do you think that's possible?
I don't think the constitutional difficulties would be the big thing. I think the big thing would be the fact that military representation with a 50-50 odd split would be very, very difficult given the amount of like fighting that's happened between the two groups, and also just the fact that neither side wants to know each other. They don't want, like, most of them don't ever want to talk to each other. Even Palestinians who work in Israel, they go there, they work, they go home. Like, they don't like want to learn each other's language. They don't give a fuck about each other's history. I think that's more the big issue, is like, how the fuck would these guys live in a shared political process? I do think that isn't impossible to change. At a very micro level, I've definitely noticed that one of the most disarming things when Israelis and Palestinians talk to each other is when one person tries to say, oh, well, do you have any idea what it's like having to deal with a checkpoint and having a gun pointed at your face? And then the Israeli might say, no, but I did lose like 2 friends in the fucking second intifada. And then it's like, and then everyone's suddenly like, oh shit. And then suddenly both people are quite fucking like humbled by that. Or if it goes the other way around as well, right? But so I don't think it's impossible, but there just needs to be like some will to achieve like working on that, and that would just take such a long time. So I don't know. I think I feel like if Barghouti came back and he was like a big shot politician in Palestine and he started saying this is what we want, like one person, one vote and all that shit, I'd probably support it, but I don't know. I don't know if it would also just get him killed.
Do you feel like the PA can continue, or do you think it has to be completely dismantled and something new erected?
I don't know, because it's like, I don't know if it's rotten to the core or if it's just the
I think
fact
it's rotten
that,
to the core. I think when Arafat was the head of it, the way that it maintained its cohesion was people were bribed. It was always seen as corrupt. It was always seen as a political tool, basically, for Arafat to ensure his control over Palestinians and to maintain some kind of support from them by being the negotiator against Israel and the representative of the hopes and dreams. Like it feels like it's always been fucked in the eyes of the Palestinians. They've never liked the PA.
Yeah, that's true. But whether or not it's just because of leadership or if it's something that actually is institutionally wrong with it, probably because of the whole area A, B, and C thing, and even like the way they collect taxes and shit is like kind of rife for corruption. I don't know, but then again, I don't actually know how much. This is a really weird thing to say. I don't know how much Palestinians at least have like democracy as a high priority, like if they'd rather just be under like a leader that they find generally like strong and like convincing, because obviously like a lot of the other Arab countries don't have democracies, but I guess because the Palestinians have had that system in the past, maybe they want it more. I don't know.
Wait, have they had that in the past, or what do you mean? When they did the one election for
yeah, they voted for Arafat. They voted for Abbas. They voted.
Wait,
for
did they vote for Arafat? I thought Arafat just was involved in the creation of the PLO. Or do you mean when they made?
No, they had elections. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I mean like
in 94, 95. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was already so popular because of like non-democratic. Who else would they have voted for besides Arafat? Was it Fatah that he fought with sometimes, or?
It was he was the leader of Fatah, but there was also like the DFLP were running and
oh, true, that's one.
But yeah,
what is the relationship? It's Fatah is part of the PLO, which became the administrator of the PA. Is that the?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Fatah is the party. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And yeah, Hamas boycotted that election, but like Arafat won like 90% of the vote, and it was a fair and free election. So. Then obviously you get to 2004 or 5, Abbas becomes president with a democratic vote, and then Hamas wins the parliamentary in 2006. So yeah, I mean they've had elections and they got the result that they wanted twice, I suppose. Yeah. Well, who knows? I think even with polling though, because Hamas boycotted that election, as did all the other rejectionists, I think even then, even with all those other opposition candidates in, I think Arafat would have probably still won like 40% of the vote in 95. So,
well, damn. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like the direction right now is not good. But
it's also very unpredictable, right? I don't know if that helps or not, because
well, it seems kind of predictable in that it's heading for another explosive point, because like there is no solution to the refugee problem. The UN has ensured that is intractable. That's tied to the resolution of Israel and Palestine. At this point, Israel has signed bilateral agreements with so many other Arab states that hate Palestinians. Egypt has no desire to do anything with them. Jordan doesn't want to do anything with them. They have foreign support from people that hate the Saudi-Israeli axis. Like, Israel doesn't want to do anything, it seems. Palestinians don't want to do it. Like, it just seems fucked. Like, when we say unpredictable, I don't even know, like, what could change to make things different. I don't even know where the change would come from. Like,
I feel like it's kind of encouraging to see Biden actually being a lot harder on Israel with the sanctions and the settlers and just, like, the public statements, because we haven't really had that from an American president since, like, Bush Sr., I guess. There might be something there, and then maybe if Palestinians can see that there's that kind of positivity happening from that part of the world, then there might be a shift there.
Maybe. Wait, hold on one sec.
I don't know.
Okay, sorry.
But yeah, I don't know. I came here to talk about history because I don't know dick about what to do right now. So
okay.
That's my safe space.
Have you followed a lot from do you know a lot from 2005 to do you know a lot about Protective Edge and Cast Lead and all that bullshit, or?
No, I mean, like, what do I need to know about that? Like,
well, I'm curious if the behavior of the Israeli army is as bad as Finkelstein claims it is. I don't believe anything he says after the fact checking I've done from some of the few things he says, but I'm curious. I mean,
I mean, what are the death tolls for Cast Lead and Protective Edge? It was like 1,500 for Cast Lead, I think, in the space of just under a month. And I think it was 2,000 dead in Protective Edge in the space of a month. I don't know. I think I've heard from IDF dudes that like they think that Israel's whole thing then was going above and beyond the law and like basically using the same guidelines that NATO does for like collateral damage and shit. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think the whole like dispute between the Goldstone report and the counter to it, where I think like Goldstone made a few very, very silly mistakes where they misread certain things about like Israeli doctrine when it came to like what was one of the accusations was that Goldstone said Israel was counting all police officers in Gaza as militants, even though they actually weren't, according to the source that they'd used. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything too exciting to look at there. Maybe. Okay. I heard that Israel violated more ceasefires than Hamas did, so who knows.
Yeah, ceasefire stuff when the sides aren't truly ready for peace seems like kind of a meme. I think even in 48, and in 67, I think every time there's like a ceasefire, there's a lot of shenaniganery that's going on. Like, I don't know if people are aware of this, but like during a ceasefire, I don't think you're even allowed to strategically reposition troops. Like, I think it's just like, I don't even know if you're allowed to resupply troops, but when you move stuff around, that's technically a violation of the ceasefire. So, but I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think, I can't remember if it was Protective Edge or Cast Lead, but it was a ceasefire violation from Israel that was done. But this thing that they'd broken the ceasefire to hit was a tunnel that had gone further past the no-go zone.
I think that was for Protective Edge. I think that's how that started,
Yeah, so, I don't know. It's probably good on the propaganda stage, but fuck.
Yeah, okay.
What's your Finkelstein debate going to be on? Is there like a topic, or is it just...
I want to read... I'm wasting time. I should be doing it now. You're wasting time. But I want to read that Inquest into Martyrdom. And then I just want to start hunting down every footnote, and I want to figure out, I really should, maybe I'll do this today. I need to figure out what the big questions are. This would go under debate prep, new note, Israel v. Palestine. I think big questions would be like whose fault was the Nakba, or who shares responsibility for the Nakba would be a big part. In 67, it would be like who shares responsibility for the 6-Day War. It's going to be big macro level questions like this. I don't know. What can you think of any that you would want debated between two scholars and then me?
The way that Mr. Finkelstein talks about fucking international law is, I feel like he cites it in a very like dubious way.
He doesn't
with the human shields thing, or I know he is very much of the whole wing that believes that Hamas did actually have a very moderated stance between sort of 2008 and or even between 2005-6 and now, I guess. Do you know anything about this? Like, not just the revised charter, but also like the idea that even them participating in elections counted as them implicitly accepting the conditions for those elections, which was the PA existing, which existed on the basis of recognizing Israel and wanting a peaceful solution. Do you know any of that? Or
no, not as much. I mean, I had heard that they moderated their charter a bit, but I'd have to check the revised charter.
Yeah, so there's a whole from 2006-7 all the way up until 2022, basically, or 23. There's this whole idea that Hamas were like trying their best to moderate, and Israel just not having it, and Israel just aggressing on Gaza and forcing Hamas to radicalize. That's like a very Finkelstein kind of position.
What year was this?
This would be from 2006 onwards, I would imagine. Yeah, well, basically since they participated in the election, which would be 2006. Yeah. A good counter to that, I guess, would be if you look at when Hamas says that they're open to peace. Usually they would say, there's one quote from them, I think the quote from them is saying that they're interested in peace around the mid-2000s, is them saying, well, first of all, we want a complete withdrawal from the 67 borders. We want a state in the 67 borders. We want return of refugees, implementation of right return, destroying the wall, removing all the settlements, releasing the prisoners, and then we'll discuss peace. Like, it's that kind of fucking shit, right?
Or like, we'll do a ceasefire if you give us release every single Palestinian prisoner, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about the revised charter, I mean, the guy who revised it and said that like we're a different party now and all that, he is still there, but he lost his leadership position like just I think it was actually a few days after the charter came out. Sure. But yeah, it never like formally supplanted the old one. But yeah, that would be a good thing to look into. So Benny Morris was okay with being up against two like scholars, and then with you.
Yeah, I think Benny Morris has actually debated. Wait, excuse me.
That's not a fucking insult. I just thought academics would be more like.
Listen, if Finkelstein can call himself a scholar, I can call myself a scholar. Okay, fuck him.
Okay.
But yeah, he was fine with it, surprisingly so. But I think he's debated Finkelstein in the past, and yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'd look forward to it. Sounds like a banger. I know Benny Morris is very unapologetic about the 1948 war.
Yeah. I mean, his
whole
like
thing is like.
Or go ahead.
Yeah, because I think even there's one article from 2008 where he puts like the refugees in quotation marks, and he's saying, yeah, well, the refugees who had basically just fought a war against them, like declared war, as if like all 700,000 of them fell under that category, and like saying that the barring of their return and because they feared the refugees becoming a fifth column to destroy Israel, and he was basically saying like I can't fault their reasoning or their logic and anything like that. So yeah, I think he's quite unapologetic about it, and I think once he's even said that they should have gone further, like they should have taken all of it.
Well, I think his feeling was after 2004, he was saying that like the biggest fault that Israel ever committed was that they didn't just ethnically cleanse or expel all of them.
Yeah, so I don't know how much I agree with that, but yeah, fucking.
I mean, it would have simplified the situation today, but yeah, obviously it would be sad and bad.
Could have, but yeah, it's one of those things where even if you could prove that it would have been a better situation for everyone, like if they'd done that, it's like still you're making at the time you're making the decision to just like ethnically cleanse even further, like yeah, and I guess like Ben Gurion quite rightly I think said no, because I think they could have taken the West Bank and Gaza back then, but
maybe. I think the whole international community was kind of freaking out, though, right? Like they wanted people to calm the fuck down.
Yeah, and it basically allowed Ben Gurion to say that like that they were in good faith pursuing peace after the war, even though that's not necessarily true or not as simple as he put it. I think even for a while, Ben Gurion just lied to the international community about. He had this line where he would constantly say that not a single Arab was expelled. So
sure,
like none of them. Yeah, I don't know. I would look forward to seeing that.
Okay. All right. Well.
Cool. All right. I'll leave you to it. Okay.
Okay. I love you, buddy.
Take care. Bye-bye.